Welcome. What you're about to hear is not simply entertainment history. This is not a typical success story. This is a journey through profound human transformation. This is the account of a performer who filled stadiums with joy while carrying invisible wounds. A man who discovered that the greatest performance is simply being authentic. Part 1. The Boy in the Shadows. Our story begins in a modest region of eastern Canada. In the early 1960s, a boy was born into a working-class family, the youngest of 4 siblings. His father worked as a musician first, then shifted into accounting work. His mother, gentle and troubled, battled depression behind closed doors. The household was quiet on the surface. Underneath, there was pain that nobody spoke about. The father possessed real talent. He could have pursued music professionally. Instead, he chose security over dreams. He believed the safe path was the only sensible one. Years later, his youngest son would learn the hardest lesson of all. Playing it safe doesn't guarantee safety. When the boy was 12, everything collapsed. His father lost his job. The family descended into poverty almost overnight. They lost their home. For months, they lived in a vehicle parked near relatives' properties. Sometimes they camped in temporary shelters. Bathrooms were shared or non-existent. Privacy disappeared. Dignity felt like a luxury. The boy and his older brother worked late, nights in factories' janitorial work while attending school during the day. He was still a child, yet he understood adult desperation. He understood hunger. He understood shame. But within that darkness, something remarkable awakened. The boy discovered he possessed an unusual gift. When he made faces, created strange voices, transformed himself into imaginary characters people noticed, they smiled. They forgot their troubles momentarily. His mother, often bedridden from illness, would brighten when he performed his made-up comedy routines. For brief moments, her suffering seemed to lift. That's when he understood something profound. Laughter could be medicine. At school, this boy was awkward and unpopular. Teachers found him disruptive. Yet something shifted when he was permitted to entertain, to stand before classmates and become someone else entirely. He began studying comedians obsessively. He practiced voices in mirrors. He studied physical comedy. He was essentially reverse engineering happiness. At 15, he attempted his first professional comedy performance at a small club. It was devastating. He froze. Audiences sat silent. He felt humiliation so intense he nearly quit forever. Instead, he returned the next week. And the next. Each time he learned something. Each time his performance improved slightly. Failure became his curriculum. By 17, he dropped out of formal education. His parents supported this decision, particularly his father, who drove him to every performance venue, who had learned to live vicariously through his son's willingness to chase the dream he had abandoned. The turning point. Fast forward to 1985. Our performer, now an aspiring entertainer in his mid-20s, sat on a hillside overlooking Los Angeles. Below him, lights glittered. Success lived down there somewhere, in those studios and offices and theaters. He felt so far away from it. He did something unusual. He removed a checkbook and wrote himself a fictional check. $10 million. He dated it a decade into the future. In the memo line, he wrote, "For bringing joy to millions." He carried this piece of paper for years. Whenever doubt overcame him, he held it. He looked at it. He made a silent promise. 10 years later, almost to the month, he earned exactly that amount for a single film. The universe had responded to his conviction. The late 1980s and early 1990s brought rapid transformation. Television offered him opportunities. Small roles accumulated. Directors began noticing his physical comedy abilities, the elastic face, the acrobatic body movements, the fearless energy. He wasn't just telling jokes. He was becoming living cartoons. In 1990, he joined an innovative sketch comedy program with an ensemble cast. He created unforgettable characters, absurd, loud, physically impossible. Audiences couldn't believe what they witnessed. Who was this person? How did his face move like that? How did he have such fearless commitment to absolute silliness? By 1994, Three massive films arrived in rapid succession. Each one shattered box office records. Suddenly, he wasn't a rising talent anymore. He was a global phenomenon. Newspapers wanted interviews. Networks wanted specials. Studios wanted everything he was willing to create. Money arrived in quantities he'd never imagined. Fame became overwhelming. Every street held strangers who knew his face, the golden cage, yet something unsettling happened alongside the success. The performer realized he didn't know himself anymore. For so long he had been other people, characters, personas, versions of a self designed for entertainment. When he tried to locate his authentic identity beneath all those masks, he found emptiness. He had married, divorced, married again briefly. He had a daughter from his first marriage, a quiet, talented young woman who was growing up mostly away from him while he chased bigger roles and more applause. He regretted this distance. He hadn't known how to balance fatherhood with the demanding hunger of his career. In the late 1990s, something shifted internally. He began rejecting the easy comedy roles. Instead, he sought projects that felt honest and emotionally complex. Critics said he was making a mistake. He's a comedian, they said. This won't work. But he did something brave. He ignored them. He accepted a role in a philosophical thriller about a man trapped in a false reality, unaware that his entire existence was artificial, observed by unseen viewers. The character slowly awakens to his imprisonment. It was metaphorically perfect for what this performer was experiencing. Trapped in a false identity he'd constructed, observed constantly by millions, unsure what was real about himself anymore. The film resonated deeply. Critics praised his depth. Audiences cried. He received major award recognition for serious acting, but success in drama didn't solve anything. After playing a mysterious, chaotic comedian from decades past using an immersive technique where he remained in character constantly, even off-camera he experienced a psychological crisis. He had inhabited that historical figure so completely that he couldn't locate himself in the aftermath. Who was he really? Where did performance end and authenticity begin? The descent and awakening, the early 2000s, brought depression of crushing proportions. Some mornings he couldn't leave bed. Some days he felt like a phantom moving through life. The applause felt hollow now. The accolades felt meaningless. He began studying philosophy intensely, Eastern traditions, Western psychology. Spiritual teachers who spoke about ego dissolution and the illusion of self. He read writers who questioned identity itself. He meditated for hours. He sat in silence and simply observed his thoughts without engaging with them. During this period, he experienced romantic loss that devastated him. A relationship ended tragically. The aftermath brought media scrutiny, judgment, and public blame. He retreated further into privacy and introspection, slowly. Through years of grief work and spiritual study, something unexpected occurred. He began to genuinely question whether this named entity with a biography and reputation, was even real, or was it all just storytelling, narrative? A performance that had become so habitual he believed in it. He started painting. Not for galleries or money, for emotional release, for prayer, for screaming without words. His paintings were wild, colorful, sometimes disturbing, sometimes beautiful. They represented his inner landscape, chaotic, searching, transforming. The quiet revolution. Years passed. He stepped away from Hollywood almost entirely. No interviews, no film roles, no public appearances. He grew a beard. He wore simple clothes, he lived simply, he walked in nature, he painted, he read. He existed. When he eventually returned to public view, he was unrecognizable not in appearance, but in presence. He no longer sought approval. He no longer performed happiness. When interviewers asked conventional questions, he answered with philosophical observations that shocked people. They wondered if he'd lost his mind. He hadn't. He'd found something they hadn't. The ability to exist without needing validation. He gave occasional talks at universities. His message was revolutionary in its simplicity. Stop building a false self. Stop performing for survival. Stop chasing what you think you should want. The greatest freedom arrives when you release the need to be anything at all. He spoke about his daughter, now an adult, a talented musician living her own life. He expressed his pride quietly without fanfare. He had learned that true parental love meant offering support without requiring recognition. He spoke about the loss he'd experienced, how trauma had ultimately liberated him from caring about trivial status markers, how grief had become his greatest teacher. He spoke about his understanding of existence itself, that the individual identity we cling to so desperately is provisional, a temporary arrangement, that consciousness itself was the only thing that mattered, that love, presence, and simple awareness were the only currencies worth pursuing. The return. Eventually, he accepted certain acting roles, but only ones that felt authentic. He played a children's television personality hiding devastating internal pain. He played a complex villain. He worked on projects that interested him philosophically, not financially, but he never returned to the frenetic pace of his earlier career. He refused to become the machine he'd been before. He protected his solitude fiercely. He would disappear for months and simply live, paint, walk, meditate, exist. The philosophy, his mature perspective on fundamental life questions became increasingly clear. On identity, he recognized that the self we cling to, our name, our history, our reputation, was essentially fictional, not in a nihilistic way, but in a liberating way. The awareness observing all of this was what mattered. That witnessing consciousness was the only real thing on love. He redefined it as presence and acceptance rather than possession or performance. True love, he believed, meant seeing someone completely without requiring them to be different. It meant showing up authentically rather than playing a role designed to please, on suffering. He understood depression not as failure, but as his authentic self rebelling against the false personality he'd constructed. Breakdown, he believed, could lead to breakthrough if you were brave enough to let your artificial self crumble on fame. He called it a drug that offered diminishing returns. The more you chased it, the emptier it became. Real satisfaction came only when you stopped chasing entirely and simply existed. On death, having experienced profound loss, he no longer feared it. He saw death not as ending but as transition. This perspective freed him to live more honestly, less gripped by the futile effort to stay safe. The current chapter, today this man lives quietly in California. He has no demanding schedule. He wakes naturally. He paints. He walks. He meditates. He writes. He watches clouds pass overhead. He laughs quietly at life's absurdities. He rarely seeks attention. He gives no interviews unless something feels genuinely meaningful. He refuses to monetize his personal growth. He exists in what he calls peaceful presence, a state beyond happiness, which he views as temporary. Peace, he's learned, is more sustainable. When asked if he's happy, he responds that he's moved beyond that word. He seeks peace instead. The difference, he explains, is that happiness depends on external circumstances, while peace requires only honest self-awareness and release of what you can't control. His impact continues to spread through recorded speeches, interviews, and his example of a radically authentic life. Young people discover his teachings and report that his message freed them from performing constantly, that it gave them permission to stop trying to be anything special. Legacy and lessons. His true legacy won't be measured in film records or box office numbers. It will be remembered as the story of someone who achieved everything the world said would make him happy and discovered it changed nothing. Then, through breakdown and reconstruction, he found genuine peace by releasing all of it. His life teaches several profound truths. First, you don't require external success to feel lost. Identity confusion happens at every level of society. Wealth and fame can actually intensify it. Second, suffering is not punishment, it's invitation. Depression, heartbreak, and failure can become doorways to deeper understanding if you move through them rather than around them. Third, the performance never ends until you let it. We all play roles. We all present false versions. The question is whether you remain enslaved by those roles or whether you consciously step out of them. Fourth, true power lies not in becoming everything. It lies in becoming nothing, releasing all the identities you've accumulated and resting in simple presence. Fifth, Real freedom arrives not when you get what you want, but when you stop desperately needing anything at all. Closing, this man's journey reminds us that the greatest performances happen off-screen in quiet moments when nobody's watching. When you choose authenticity over approval, when you release the mask despite the fear of who you'll find underneath. He came into the world as a poor boy from a small town, carrying family pain in his young bones. He became a global figure who filled theaters with laughter while hiding his own anguish. He broke, he grieved, he questioned everything, and then he let it all go, in that release. He discovered something increasingly rare in our high performance. Culture, genuine peace. Not the temporary kind that depends on circumstances. The permanent kind that survives loss, disappointment, and change. His story isn't really about entertainment. It's about awakening. It's about the possibility that each of us can walk from darkness into light, not by acquiring more, but by releasing what we've been clinging to. Perhaps that's the most important performance of all. The performance of finally being yourself.